I'm Raphael Cole, 66 years old, and yesterday, when I arrived with my daughter to meet her fiancé and his parents, they looked at me and said, "Oh great, the beggar father-in-law has arrived." Then her fiancé smirked and added, "Please don't embarrass us at the wedding with that old suit." They didn't know I was the CEO of the company that signs their paychecks. My response was calm and simple: "You're all fired." Before I continue, please like this video, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Let me take you back to the beginning of that day. That cursed, soul-crushing day that started with hope and ended with my heart feeling like it had been fed through a paper shredder. I woke up early that morning feeling nervous, anxious even. My daughter Isabella had been dating this man for 8 months, and I'd never met him, never met his family. She'd kept them separate from me, always making excuses. "Dad, they're just really busy," she'd say. "Dad, the timing hasn't been right." I told myself not to read into it. I told myself she was protecting me, giving me space after her mother passed 3 years ago. But deep down, in that place where fathers know things they don't want to admit, I wondered if she was ashamed of me. I'm not a flashy man. I don't need to be. I built my company from nothing, from a garage with 2 employees and a dream that most people laughed at. 38 years later, that company employs over 4,000 people. It's worth more than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, but you wouldn't know it to look at me. I drive a 15-year-old sedan, the same car I bought when my wife was still alive because she loved the color, forest green. "It reminds me of when we were young," she'd say. "I can't bring myself to replace it. The leather still smells like her perfume on humid days." I wear simple clothes, comfortable clothes, a cotton button-down shirt and khaki pants, clean, pressed, respectable, but not designer, not expensive-looking. Why would I need to prove anything to anyone? I know who I am, I know what I've built. The people who matter know too. Or so I thought. That morning I stood in front of my mirror and second-guessed everything. Should I wear the suit, the one I keep for board meetings and shareholder conferences? No, I told myself, this is a family gathering. Be yourself, be the man Isabella knows, the man her mother loved, authentic, real, present. God, how I regret that decision. I drove the hour and 40 minutes to the address Isabella had texted me. A nice neighborhood, upper middle class. The kind of place where people have 3-car garages and landscaping services. The houses all looked the same, modern, sterile, expensive in that obvious way that screams, "We need you to know we have money." I pulled up to the house at exactly 2 p.m. I'm always on time. It's a habit from decades of running a business where minutes can cost millions. I sat in my car for a moment, taking a breath, gathering myself. Through the front window, I could see Isabella moving around inside. My beautiful daughter, 28 years old, smart as a whip, kind-hearted, successful in her own career as a pediatric nurse. She'd made me so proud. She deserved happiness. Even if I had reservations about this man I'd never met, even if something in my gut twisted every time she mentioned him, I wanted to support her. I wanted to walk into that house with an open mind and an open heart. I grabbed the bottle of wine I'd brought, a 1998 Bordeaux from my personal collection, worth about $800, though they'd never know that, and I walked up the stone pathway to their front door. I rang the doorbell, and that's when my world tilted sideways. The door opened, and there he stood, Chad, her fiancé, tall, probably in his early 30s, with that gym-sculpted build and the kind of haircut that costs more than most people spend on groceries. He was wearing designer clothes. I could see the logo on his shirt, that overpriced brand that charges $300 for cotton. He looked at me, really looked at me. His eyes traveled from my simple shoes to my khaki pants to my cotton shirt to my face, and I saw it, that flicker of disappointment, of judgment, of disgust. "Oh," he said, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm, "you must be Isabella's dad." He said it the way you might say, "Oh, you must be the plumber." Before I could respond, before I could extend my hand or offer a greeting, he turned his head back into the house and called out, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Honey, everyone, the beggar father-in-law has arrived." Beggar. That word hit me like a physical blow. like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with a frozen fist. I stood there on the doorstep, the expensive wine in my hand, and I felt something inside me crack. But I didn't show it. Decades of negotiating with cutthroat businessmen and hostile takeovers have taught me how to control my face, how to breathe through pain, how to smile when you want to scream. "It's nice to finally meet you," I said quietly, extending my hand. He looked at my hand like I was offering him a dead fish. He shook it limply, barely making contact, then stepped aside to let me in. "Come on in, I guess," he said, that smirk still playing on his lips. "Try not to embarrass us too much at the wedding with that old suit, though I guess beggars can't be choosers, right?" There it was again, beggar, the word he thought defined me, the word he thought gave him power over me. I stepped inside, my jaw clenched so tight I could feel my molars grinding together. Isabella appeared from the kitchen, her face flushed. She'd heard. Of course she'd heard. Her eyes met mine, and I saw it. Shame, embarrassment, confusion, all swirling together in those brown eyes she got from her mother. "Dad," she said, her voice small and strained, "you made it." She came over and hugged me, but it was the kind of hug you give someone when you're being watched. Performative, uncomfortable, nothing like the tight, warm embraces we usually shared. "I brought wine," I said, holding up the bottle. Chad snatched it from my hand before Isabella could take it. He glanced at the label, his lip curling. "Never heard of it," he announced to the room. "Probably picked it up at some discount store. Thanks though, man. We'll use it for cooking or something." $800 wine, reduced to cooking ingredient. I said nothing. "Come meet my parents," Chad said, gesturing toward the living room. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I should be grateful for the opportunity to be in their presence. I walked into the living room, Isabella trailing behind me like a ghost, and there they were, Chad's parents. His father, Gerald, was a large man, red-faced, loud, dressed in golf attire like he'd just come from the country club. His mother, Patricia, was thin, sharp-featured, dripping in jewelry that screamed, "Look at me, I'm wealthy." Real or fake, I couldn't tell, didn't care. They looked at me the way vultures look at roadkill. "So you're Isabella's father," Patricia said, her voice carrying that particular tone that wealthy people use when they're trying to sound polite but actually mean, "You're beneath me." She didn't stand, didn't offer her hand, just looked at me from her position on the white leather couch like I was something that might stain the upholstery. "I am," I said, "Raphael Cole. It's nice to meet you both." Gerald grunted something that might have been a greeting. He was focused on the football game playing on their massive television, 70 inches at least. Everything in this house was oversized, overloud, over the top. Compensation for something, my therapist would probably say. "Please sit," Patricia said, gesturing vaguely to a chair across from them. Not the couch, not next to them. The chair, separate, other. I sat. Isabella perched on the arm of the couch, looking like she wanted to disappear into the cushions. Chad stood behind his parents, arms crossed, that infuriating smirk still plastered on his face. "So, Raphael," Patricia began, and I could hear the judgment in every syllable of my name. "What do you do for a living?" It's a simple question, an innocuous question, the kind of thing people ask when they first meet. But the way she asked it, the way her eyes traveled over my clothes again, the way her mouth pursed like she was sucking on something sour, it wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I work in manufacturing," I said simply. "It's not a lie. I do work in manufacturing. I just happen to own the entire company." "Oh," she said, and that one syllable contained volumes of disappointment. "Manufacturing, how? Blue collar." Blue collar, like it was a disease. Like the people who build things with their hands are somehow less than the people who shuffle papers in air-conditioned offices. "Someone has to make the things people use," I said evenly. "Yes, well," Gerald chimed in, not looking away from the television, "we always told Chad to get an education so he wouldn't end up in a factory somewhere. No offense." Every offense, that's what no offense always means. It's the coward's way of insulting someone while pretending to be polite. None taken, I lied. Chad laughed, actually laughed. Yeah, Dad was pretty clear about that. He'd say, son, you study hard and get a good job, or you'll end up like those guys in stained uniforms punching a clock. Those guys, the men and women who work for me, the people who have built their careers at my company, the single mothers and fathers supporting families, the immigrants chasing the American dream, the veterans rebuilding their lives, those guys. My hands were shaking. I hid them under my thighs, pressing them into the chair. Fortunately, Patricia continued, her voice syrupy with false sweetness, our Chad has a wonderful position at Titanium Solutions. Do you know it? It's a very prestigious company, very stable, very selective. Titanium Solutions, my company, the one I founded in 1987, the one I named after my wife's favorite element because she was a chemistry teacher and she thought titanium represented strength and resilience. The company these people worked for. I've heard of it, I said, keeping my voice neutral. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. Chad's in management, Gerald added, finally looking away from the television to puff out his chest. Been there 5 years, they love him, give him bonuses every year. The CEO is supposed to be this hard-ass, never shows his face, but Chad's doing great anyway. I actually just got promoted, Chad said, that smirk growing wider. Regional oversight, pretty big deal, means I'm basically untouchable there. Untouchable, the word bounced around in my skull like a bullet. Regional oversight, I knew that position. I'd approved the promotion myself 3 months ago, though I'd never seen his face. I approved hundreds of promotions a year. I trust my executive team to make those decisions. I sign off on them, but I don't meet every person who moves up. Maybe I should have. And Patricia works there too, Gerald continued. In HR, been there 12 years, rock-solid position. 15 years, Patricia corrected sharply. 15 years in human resources. I've seen dozens of executives come and go. I practically run that department. She didn't, I knew she didn't. HR was run by my chief human resources officer, Alicia, a brilliant woman with 2 master's degrees and a spine of steel. But I said nothing. I just listened as they bragged about their positions in my company. As they talked about the benefits they received, the salary increases, the retirement plan I'd personally fought to improve 5 years ago when the board wanted to cut it. They had no idea who I was. No idea that every dollar they earned came from the company I'd built, from my vision, my risk, my decades of sacrifice. That's wonderful, I said softly. It sounds like you've all done very well. Well, we work hard, Patricia said, as if working hard was something unique to them. As if thousands of other employees at Titanium Solutions didn't work just as hard, if not harder. We take pride in our appearance and our work ethic. We're not the kind of people who just coast. The implication was clear. Unlike you, unlike Isabella's father, who shows up in discount clothes and drives an old car. Unlike this beggar who somehow managed to raise a daughter good enough to marry their precious son. Dad works hard too, Isabella said suddenly, her voice cracking slightly. She was trying to defend me, trying to salvage something from this nightmare. He's always worked hard. I'm sure he does, Chad said, his tone dripping with condescension. In his own way, everyone has different standards, babe. Different standards, lower standards, that's what he meant. You know, Patricia said, leaning forward slightly, her eyes glittering with malicious curiosity, if you need help, Raphael, we could probably pull some strings. Get you a job at Titanium Solutions. Something entry-level, of course. Custodial, maybe, or warehouse work. Chad could put in a good word. Put in a good word to get me a job at my own company as a janitor in the empire I'd built from nothing. The rage that flooded through me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It was hot and cold at the same time. It made my vision blur at the edges. It made my hands stop shaking and start clenching into fists. But I breathed. I counted to 5 in my head. I thought about my wife and what she would say. Don't let small people make you small, Raphael. You're better than that. That's very kind, I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me. but I'm doing fine where I am. If you say so, Gerald said, clearly not believing me, but the offer stands. We take care of family, even when family comes from humble circumstances. Humble circumstances. Is that what 38 years of building an empire was called? Humble circumstances. Chad walked over and put his hand on Isabella's shoulder. She flinched slightly, but he didn't notice, or didn't care. Don't worry, Mr. Cole. Once Isabella and I are married, we'll make sure she's taken care of. She won't have to worry about, he gestured vaguely at me, at my clothes, at my car visible through the window, at my entire existence. She won't have to worry about ending up like her old man, he clarified, just in case I'd missed the insult. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Chad, don't. What, I'm just being honest, he said, squeezing her shoulder harder. Your dad knows I'm joking around, right, Mr. Cole? We're all family here. We can speak freely. Speak freely. That's what bullies always say when they want permission to continue being cruel. Of course, I said. Good, Gerald said, turning back to his game. So when's dinner? I'm starving. Just like that, the conversation moved on. They'd insulted me, diminished me, offered me pity and charity, and now they were ready for dinner. Like I was nothing, like my feelings were irrelevant, like I was just some unfortunate obstacle they had to tolerate because their son wanted to marry my daughter. We moved to the dining room, an enormous table set with expensive china that I could tell was for show, probably used once a year. Everything in this house was for show, for image, for the desperate need to prove to the world that they mattered. I sat at one end. Isabella sat next to me, her hand finding mine under the table. She squeezed it once. An apology, a plea, I squeezed back. It's okay, the squeeze said, I'm okay. But I wasn't okay. Every minute in that house was like swallowing glass. Patricia served dinner, catered, I could tell, despite her claims of spending all day in the kitchen. The portions were small, the presentation pretentious, the kind of meal that costs a fortune and leaves you hungry. So, Raphael, Gerald said through a mouthful of overpriced chicken, what kind of car do you drive? I saw something in the driveway that looked like it was from the last century. Laughter. Chad and Patricia laughed, actually laughed. It's a 2010 sedan, I said. It runs well. A 2010, Chad howled. Man, that thing is older than some of my employees. Don't you think it's time for an upgrade? There are payment plans, for people on a budget. People on a budget. I have more money in my checking account right now than this entire family will earn in the next 10 years combined. But they didn't know that. They couldn't conceive of it. I like my car, I said simply. Suit yourself, Gerald said with a shrug. But when you show up to the wedding in that thing, people are gonna wonder, just saying, might want to consider renting something nice, for Isabella's sake. For Isabella's sake. He was using my daughter as a weapon against me, implying that my presence, my appearance, my very existence would embarrass her on her wedding day. I looked at Isabella. She was staring at her plate, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She wasn't eating, she wasn't speaking, she was just breaking. And that's when something in me snapped, not in an explosive way, not in a way they could see, but internally something fundamental shifted. A line was crossed, a decision was made. Actually, I said, setting down my fork carefully, I wanted to ask you all something. They looked at me, surprised that I was speaking, surprised that I had something to say. Where did you say you all work again? Titanium Solutions, Chad said proudly, puffing up like a peacock. The best manufacturing company in the region, maybe in the country. That's right, Patricia added. We're very proud to be part of such a prestigious organization. And you've been there how long? I asked, looking at each of them in turn. 15 years, Patricia said. 5 years, Chad added. I've been consulting with them for 7, Gerald said. Not full-time, but they value my input. That's wonderful, I said, folding my hands on the table. It must be a good company to work for. The best, Chad confirmed. Like I said, the CEO is this mysterious guy. Nobody ever sees him, but the company runs like clockwork. Benefits are great. Pay is solid. We're very fortunate. Very fortunate, I echoed. And you mentioned the CEO is strict. Hardas is what I heard, Gerald said. Real tough on people who don't pull their weight, but fair, I guess. As long as you do your job, you're fine. As long as you do your job, I repeated slowly. That seems reasonable. It is, Patricia said. That's why we've all lasted so long there. We work hard. We have standards. We have integrity. Integrity, that word coming from her mouth, was like hearing a snake talk about loyalty. I took a breath. I looked at Isabella, who was watching me with wide, confused eyes. I looked at Chad, smirking at me from across the table. I looked at Patricia and Gerald, so smug in their certainty that they were better than me. And I spoke, quietly, calmly, every word measured and precise. You won't have to worry about meeting the CEO anymore, I said, because you already have. Silence, complete, absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet 3 rooms away. What? Chad said, his smirk faltering. My name is Raphael Cole, I said, looking each of them in the eye. I founded Titanium Solutions in 1987. I've been the CEO for 38 years. I sign your paychecks. I approve your benefits. I built the company you're so proud to work for. Patricia's face went white. Gerald's fork clattered onto his plate. Chad's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. You're lying, Chad stammered. The CEO is some old guy who never shows his face. You're just some factory worker trying to. I'm 66 years old, I interrupted, my voice still calm. I don't show my face because I have 5 executive vice presidents who handle day-to-day operations. I show up for board meetings and strategic planning. I trust my team to run the company. Maybe I shouldn't have trusted them quite so much. This is ridiculous, Patricia said, but her voice was shaking. You can't just claim to be. Patricia Henderson, I said, looking directly at her. Employee number 45,782, hired on March 14th, 15 years ago. You work in HR level 2. Your salary is $78,000 a year. You received a 2.1% raise last year. You've been written up twice for inappropriate workplace behavior, both complaints filed by younger employees who felt you were condescending to them. Her face went from white to green. Gerald Henderson, not an employee but a contractor. You were hired 7 years ago to consult on logistics. Your contract is renewed annually. Last year, your renewal was contested by the logistics team because they felt your recommendations were outdated. I personally approved the renewal anyway because the EVP of operations vouched for you. Gerald looked like he might vomit. And Chad Henderson, employee number 89,234, regional oversight manager as of 3 months ago, salary $95,000. You were promoted despite concerns from 2 department heads who felt you lacked the interpersonal skills for management. I approved that promotion because your numbers were good and I believe in giving people opportunities. Chad's smirk was completely gone. He looked terrified. Good. Starting Monday, I continued, my voice dropping even lower, becoming almost a whisper, none of you will be returning to Titanium Solutions. Your access badges will be deactivated. Your accounts will be suspended. HR will be in touch regarding your final paychecks and the collection of company property. You can't do that, Chad exploded, jumping to his feet. That's abuse of power. That's illegal. I'll sue. You'll do nothing, I said, my calm demeanor never breaking. Because I can do that. I'm the CEO. I have the authority to terminate any employee for any legal reason. And disrespecting the owner of the company, insulting me in my face, calling me a beggar, and treating my daughter with contempt. Those are all perfectly legal reasons. This is insane, Patricia shrieked. You can't fire people because your feelings were hurt. I'm not firing you because my feelings were hurt, I said. I'm firing you because you lack the character, integrity, and basic human decency that I require from people who represent my company. You spent the last 2 hours proving to me that you're bullies, that you judge people based on their appearance, that you think wealth and status make you better than others. Those aren't the values Titanium Solutions stands for. Those aren't the values I stand for. Dad, Isabella's voice broke through. She was sobbing now, full-on sobbing. Dad, please, This isn't your fault, I said gently, looking at my daughter. You didn't know, you couldn't have known. But you're ruining my life, she cried. You're ruining everything. Those words cut deeper than anything Chad's family had said, deeper than beggar, deeper than any insult they could have thrown at me. I'm saving your life, I said softly. You just can't see it yet. I stood up from the table. My legs were surprisingly steady. My hands had stopped shaking. I felt cold, numb, disconnected from my body. Enjoy your dinner, I said. Send me the bill for the wedding deposits. I'll reimburse you. Isabella, when you're ready to talk, I'll be here. I love you. I've always loved you. And I will always love you no matter what. I walked toward the door. Behind me, chaos erupted. Chad was screaming. Patricia was crying. Gerald was threatening lawyers. Isabella was begging me to come back, to take it back, to fix it. But I couldn't. The words were out. The decision was made. I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I got in my old car, the one they'd mocked. I started the engine. And I drove home in complete silence, tears streaming down my face, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. What had I done? What had I done? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in my study, the same study where I'd drafted the business plan for Titanium Solutions 38 years ago, and I stared at the wall. My phone buzzed constantly, text after text, call after call. From Chad, you're a psychopath. You're abusing your power. I'm calling my lawyer. You'll regret this. From Patricia, how dare you? We have bills. We have responsibilities. You can't just destroy people's lives because you're petty and vindictive. From Gerald, this is illegal. We're going to sue you for everything you have. You'll be hearing from our attorney. From Isabella, Dad, please, please call me back. Please fix this. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Why would you hurt me like this? That last one, that text from my daughter, that was the one that made me put my phone down and put my head in my hands. Why would you hurt me like this? She thought I was hurting her. She thought this was about control or anger or some petty revenge. She couldn't see that every single decision I'd made in the last 3 hours was about protecting her, about saving her from a life with people who would always see her as beneath them, who would always judge her based on where she came from, who would spend decades making her feel small. I'd failed her, that's what I felt in that moment. Not vindication, not satisfaction, just failure. I'd failed to raise a daughter who could see through Chad's superficial charm. I'd failed to be present enough in her life that she felt comfortable introducing me to her boyfriend earlier. I'd failed to teach her that her worth wasn't tied to what other people thought of her father. My wife would have known what to do. My wife would have handled this with grace and wisdom. She would have made Isabella understand. But my wife was gone, 3 years in the ground, and I was alone in this study making decisions that might destroy my relationship with my only child. The night stretched on. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the darkness, watching the city lights twinkle outside my window, and I wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. At 3 a.m., I finally picked up my phone. I opened my email and sent a message to Alicia, my Chief Human Resources Officer. Effective immediately, terminate the following employees. Chad Henderson, employee 89,234. Patricia Henderson, employee 45,782. Gerald Henderson, contractor ID C7892. Reason, conduct unbecoming of company values. Process all terminations by end of business Monday. Ensure all legal protocols are followed. I'll explain in our call Monday morning. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I sent another email to my head of security. Please have the door camera footage from my visit to address this evening sent to my personal secure drive. Also, begin a full background check on Chad Henderson. I want to know everything. I'd been in business long enough to trust my instincts, and my instincts were screaming that there was more to Chad than just an entitled jerk. Nobody treats their future father-in-law that way unless they're either monumentally stupid or hiding something, or both. Monday morning came. I'd barely slept. I looked like hell, I'm sure. But I got up, I showered, I put on one of my actual suits, the expensive ones I keep for board meetings, and I went to work. The moment I walked into the building, I could feel it. The whispers, the stares, word had spread. Of course it had. In a company of 4,000 people, news travels fast. Especially news about the mysterious CEO suddenly appearing and firing an entire family. Alicia was waiting in my office. She's worked for me for 12 years, and in that time, I've never seen her rattled. But that morning, she looked concerned. "Raphael," she said, closing the door behind her, "what happened?" I told her everything, the insults, the condescension, the beggar comment, the mockery of my clothes and car, the offer to get me a custodial job at my own company. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "They deserved it," she finally said, "but you know this is going to blow back on you." "I know. They could sue. Let them. The board might question your judgment." "The board can question all they want. I still own 73% of this company. Unless they want to buy me out, and they can't afford to, they'll accept my decision." Alicia sighed. "What about Isabella?" And there it was, the real question, the one that mattered. "I don't know," I admitted. "She's not speaking to me. She thinks I've ruined her life." "Have you?" "I hope not. I hope I've saved it." Alicia stood up. "I'll process the terminations today. Do you want security to escort them out if they show up?" "If necessary, but I don't think they will. I think they're smart enough to know they can't win this fight." I was right. None of them showed up. Chad's access badge was scanned at 6:47 a.m., probably coming in early to clear out his desk, and then never again. Patricia tried to log into her computer remotely at 8:15 a.m. and found her access denied. Gerald never even attempted to enter the building. By noon, their personal items had been collected by security, packaged up, and shipped to their home address. By 2 p.m., their final paychecks had been processed. By 5 p.m., they were officially no longer associated with Titanium Solutions in any capacity. Gone just like that, decades of work erased in a day. I should have felt something: satisfaction, justice, relief. Instead, I just felt empty. My phone rang constantly. I ignored it until I saw it was my daughter. "Hello, Isabella," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "You actually did it." Her voice was cold, distant. "You actually fired them, all of them." "I did." "Do you have any idea what you've done?" She wasn't yelling. I almost wished she was yelling. This cold anger was worse. Chad's parents are destroyed. They can't pay their mortgage. They're going to lose their house. Gerald's contract was their main source of income. And Chad is a wreck. He's been applying to jobs all day and nobody will touch him. Word has already spread in the industry that he was fired by the CEO personally. He brought this on himself. No, now she was yelling. You brought this on him, on all of them, because your ego couldn't handle a few jokes. Those weren't jokes, Isabella. Those were insults. They called me a beggar. They said I'd embarrass you at your own wedding. They offered to get me a janitor position at my own company. That's not joking. That's cruelty. So you respond with cruelty? Her voice broke. You respond by destroying their lives, by destroying my relationship. Chad won't even look at me now, Dad. He says it's my fault. He says I should have warned him. He says. She stopped, sobbing. What does he say? He says if I was a good fiance, I would have told him the truth about you. He says I set him up. He says he doesn't know if he can marry someone from a family like ours. A family like ours. Even now, even after everything, Chad was still looking down on us, still judging, still seeing us as beneath him. Isabella, listen to me. No, you listen to me, Dad. I'm 28 years old. I'm an adult. I've made my own life, my own decisions. And you just came in and destroyed everything because you couldn't handle being uncomfortable for one dinner. One dinner, Dad, that's all it was. It was more than one dinner. It was a preview of the rest of your life, of how they would treat you, of how they would treat our family, of the values they would pass on to your children. It was everything. You don't get to decide that, she screamed. You don't get to decide who I love or who I marry or what my life looks like. You're my father, not my dictator. I'm not trying to be your dictator. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need your protection. I need your support. I need you to accept my choices even if you don't agree with them. But instead, you. She was crying so hard she couldn't speak. My heart was breaking, actually breaking. Isabella, please, come to my house. Let me show you something. Let me. I can't see you right now, she said. I can't. I just can't. She hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, listening to the dial tone, and I realized that I might have won the battle, but lost the war. I'd protected my daughter from Chad's family, but I'd lost my daughter in the process. The next few days were a nightmare. The local news picked up the story. Someone had leaked it, probably Gerald or Patricia. Local CEO fires entire family after personal dispute, the headline read. The article painted me as a tyrant, a vindictive billionaire who couldn't handle criticism. They interviewed an unnamed source who claimed I'd always been unstable and power-hungry. My phone rang off the hook. My PR team was in panic mode. The board demanded a meeting. Shareholders were concerned. Clients were asking questions. And through it all, Isabella wouldn't speak to me. I finally did the one thing I should have done from the beginning. I hired a private investigator, not to dig up dirt on Chad, though I certainly wouldn't have minded that, but to understand him, to know who my daughter had fallen in love with, to see if I'd made the right call or if I'd destroyed a good man's life over a few insensitive comments. The pie's name was Vincent. He'd worked with me before on corporate espionage cases, discreet, thorough, expensive, worth every penny. How deep do you want me to go? He asked during our first meeting. As deep as it takes, I said. I want to know everything, his finances, his employment history, his relationships, his medical records if you can get them legally, everything. That'll take time. I have time. I don't have my daughter, but I have time. Vincent nodded and got to work. While I waited for his report, I watched my daughter's life implode from a distance. Social media told the story. Chad's posts went from confident and boastful to bitter and angry. He posted vague things about fake people and betrayal from unexpected places. His friends commented with support, not knowing the full story. Isabella's post stopped altogether. She went dark. No updates, no photos, nothing. I tried calling her every day, left voicemails that went from apologetic to desperate to resigned. Bella, please, just talk to me. Just let me explain. I love you. I love you more than anything in this world. Please. Nothing. 2 weeks after that horrible dinner, Vincent called me into his office. He had a folder, a thick folder, the kind of folder that meant he'd found something. You're not going to like this, he said, sliding it across the desk. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. Chad Henderson had a pattern. This wasn't his first rodeo. 3 years ago, he dated a woman named Cecilia. She came from money, old money, the kind that built this city. They'd been together for 18 months. He'd been attentive, charming, perfect, right up until her grandfather died and the will was read. Cecilia inherited less than expected. Most of the money went to charity. Within 2 weeks, Chad broke up with her, told her he needed space, moved on immediately. Before Cecilia, there was another woman, Amanda. She worked in finance, made good money, had a trust fund. Chad dated her for a year, then her company downsized and she lost her job. The trust fund took a hit in a bad investment. Chad ghosted her, literally disappeared from her life without a word. The pattern was clear. Chad dated women with money. When the money situation changed, Chad disappeared. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was his financial situation. Chad was drowning in debt, credit cards maxed out, student loans from a degree he never finished, a car lease he couldn't afford, personal loans from shady lenders. He owed over $200,000 to various creditors. His parents weren't much better. The house they lived in, the one with the white leather couches and the 70-inch TV was mortgaged to the hilt. They were 3 months behind on payments. Gerald's consulting income had dried up after other companies stopped hiring him, and Patricia's salary alone couldn't cover their lifestyle. They were bleeding money and drowning fast. And then Chad met Isabella, sweet, kind Isabella, who was a pediatric nurse and certainly didn't have the kind of money Chad needed, but who happened to mention 6 months into their relationship that her father did okay for himself, that he owned a company, that he was comfortable. I found the text messages. Vincent had somehow gotten access to Chad's phone records. The messages to his parents were damning. Met the girl's dad. He's loaded, plays it down, but I can tell, old money vibes. Might have hit the jackpot with this one. Dad says if I can lock this down, we're set. Her father will help us out. She doesn't know about the debt. Keep it that way. There it was, in black and white, digital evidence of exactly what I'd suspected. Chad wasn't marrying Isabella because he loved her. He was marrying her because he thought she was his ticket to financial security. And the worst part, there were messages after our dinner, after I'd fired them, messages that made me want to drive to their house and, "This is your fault," he'd texted Isabella. "If you'd told me your dad was the CEO, I could have played it differently. You sabotaged us. You need to fix this, get Daddy to hire us back, use whatever influence you have. If you really loved me, you'd do this, you'd save us." I closed the folder. My hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from hurt, it was from rage. "Can I take this?" I asked Vincent. "Copies are yours. I kept the originals for my records." "Thank you, Mr. Cole," Vincent said as I stood to leave. "For what it's worth, you made the right call. That kid is a parasite, and his parents enabled him every step of the way. Your daughter dodged a bullet. She doesn't see it that way. She will, eventually. Truth has a way of coming out." I took the folder home. I sat in my study again, that same study where I'd made the decision to fire them 2 weeks ago, and I opened my laptop. I uploaded the door camera footage that security had sent me, the footage of me arriving, of Chad opening the door, of him calling me a beggar, of his parents' disgusted looks, of every insult, every condescending remark, every moment of cruelty. Then I compiled Vincent's report into a digital file, the relationship patterns, the financial records, the text messages, everything. I sent it all to Isabella with a simple message. "When you're ready to see the truth, it's here. I love you, I'll always love you, and I'll be waiting for whenever you want to talk. Your dad." I hit send and closed my laptop. 3 days later, my doorbell rang at 11 p.m. I opened the door to find Isabella standing there. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Her hair was a mess. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She looked broken. "He asked me for money," she whispered. "After everything, after all the anger and blame and guilt trips, he asked me for money, $20,000, to tide them over. He said if I loved him, I'd help his family." I didn't say anything. I just opened my arms. She collapsed into them, sobbing like she was 5 years old again, like when she'd fallen off her bike and scraped her knees, and only Daddy could make it better. I held her tight and I let her cry. I stroked her hair and I whispered, I've got you, you're safe now." We stood there in the doorway for what felt like hours. Eventually, I guided her inside, sat her on the couch, and made her tea. The same chamomile tea her mother used to make when things were hard. "I'm so stupid," she said, her hands wrapped around the mug. "I'm so incredibly stupid." "You're not stupid. You're trusting. You're kind. You see the best in people. Those are good qualities, Bella. They're just. Sometimes they make you vulnerable to people who would take advantage." "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "Even after you sent me everything. The videos, the reports, the messages. I kept thinking there had to be an explanation, that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But then he asked for money and I realized, you were right. You were right about everything. I wish I hadn't been." "Did you know, that night at dinner, did you already know about his pattern?" "No, I suspected something was off, but I didn't know the details until I hired the investigator. The decision to fire them was based purely on how they treated me, and by extension, how they would treat you. The investigation just confirmed what my gut already knew. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I told him it was over. Yesterday, I gave him back the ring. He didn't even try to fight for me. He took it and asked if I could at least give him half of what he'd paid for it to help with his debt." Jesus Christ. What did you say? I told him to leave, and then I watched the door camera footage you sent me. I watched it over and over, and I realized I'd never seen those people before. The way they looked at you, the way they talked to you, those weren't good people having a bad day. Those were bad people showing their true colors. I'm sorry you had to go through this. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I'm sorry I said you ruined my life. I'm sorry Her voice broke again. "Hey," I said, moving to sit next to her on the couch. "You don't have to apologize. You were in love. You were invested. You wanted it to work. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. But I chose him over you. In that moment, I chose him. You were confused and hurt and put in an impossible position. And even then, even when you were angry with me, I never stopped loving you. Not for a second. You're my daughter. You could hate me for the rest of my life, and I would still love you with everything I have." She leaned her head on my shoulder, just like she used to when she was little. "What do I do now?" "You heal, you learn, you grow. And you remember that you're worth more than someone who only wants you when you come with financial benefits." Are you going to say, "I told you so"? Never. You can, "I deserve it." No, you don't. You deserve compassion and support and time to process this. And ice cream, definitely ice cream. She laughed. It was a small laugh, watery and broken, but it was a laugh. Mom's chocolate chip therapy. Is there any other kind? We sat there on the couch, eating ice cream at 11:30 at night, not really talking, just being together, being father and daughter, being family. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. But things weren't okay for Chad and his family, not by a long shot, and I'd be lying if I said I felt bad about it. The day after Isabella broke off the engagement, Chad went on social media. He posted a long, rambling rant about how I'd abused my power and destroyed lives over a personal vendetta. He claimed I was unstable, dangerous, and shouldn't be in charge of a company. He painted himself as the victim and me as the villain. His post went viral, not in the way he'd hoped. Because within hours, people started digging. The internet is undefeated when it comes to finding dirt on people who present themselves as victims. They found his previous relationships. They found court records of debt judgments. They found posts from his exes talking about his financial manipulation. They found everything. And suddenly, the narrative flipped. Team CEO started trending. People were posting things like, "If someone called my dad a beggar at dinner, I'd do worse than fire them, and actions have consequences, and maybe don't insult your boss at his own table." The court of public opinion had spoken, and they'd sided with me. Chad's follow-up posts, trying to control the damage, only made it worse. He came across as whiny, entitled, and manipulative. His parents tried to jump in, defending him, but that just brought more attention to their own financial irresponsibility and the fact that they'd raised a con artist. Within a week, the whole story was everywhere. Local news picked it up again, but this time with a different angle. Young man's gold-digging scheme backfires spectacularly. National outlets ran it as a cautionary tale about judging people by appearances. Business magazines used it as a case study in leadership and having the courage to make hard decisions. I didn't comment on any of it. My PR team advised silence, and for once, I listened. The story was telling itself. I didn't need to add fuel to the fire. But the consequences for Chad's family kept mounting. Patricia couldn't find a new job. Every HR department she applied to would Google her name and find the story. Who wants to hire an HR professional who was fired for unprofessional conduct? Gerald's consulting contracts evaporated completely. And Chad Chad was radioactive in the business world. Nobody would touch him. Their house went into foreclosure. They had to move into a small apartment across town. Their car got repossessed. All the expensive things they'd surrounded themselves with, all the status symbols they'd used to prop up their egos, disappeared. They were experiencing, for the first time in their lives, what it felt like to actually struggle, what it felt like to be judged, what it felt like to be looked down on. I should have felt satisfaction, part of me did, but mostly I just felt tired. 1 month after the dinner from hell, Isabella came to my office. She looked different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. "He's leaving," she said, sitting across from my desk. "Chad, his parents too, they're moving to another state. Patricia has a sister in Arizona who said they could stay with her until they get back on their feet." "Good," I said, and I meant it. I didn't want them in the same city as my daughter. I didn't want even the possibility of them running into each other at a grocery store or gas station. "He sent me one last message," she continued. "Want to hear it?" "Do I?" "Probably not, but I'm going to tell you anyway." She pulled out her phone and read, "I hope you're happy. You and your father destroyed my life. I loved you, and you threw it away for money. You're just as greedy as he is. I hope you both rot." I felt my jaw clench. Block him. I already did, but Dad, he actually believed it. He actually convinced himself that he loved me and that we were the bad guys. That's what scares me. He has no self-awareness, no ability to see himself clearly. If things had gone differently, if I'd married him, I would have spent my life with someone who would always make me feel like I was in the wrong, like I was never enough. "You're more than enough, Bella. You always have been." "I know that now. I'm just sorry it took all this to realize it. Sometimes the most valuable lessons are the most painful ones." She nodded, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you regret it, firing them, all the fallout that came after?" I thought about it, really thought about it. The sleepless nights, the stress, the temporary loss of my relationship with my daughter, the media circus, the board meetings where I had to defend my decision, all of it. "No," I said finally, "I don't regret it, because at the end of the day I protected you, maybe not in the most elegant way, maybe not in the way that caused the least amount of damage, but I protected you from a life of pain and manipulation and conditional love, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." She smiled. "That's what I thought you'd say. Does that make me a bad person?" "No, it makes you my dad." 3 months after the dinner, life started to return to normal, sort of. Isabella was thriving. She'd thrown herself into her work, volunteering for extra shifts at the hospital, spending time with friends she'd neglected during her relationship with Chad. She started therapy to process everything and to understand how she'd missed the red flags. She was healing. The media attention died down. The business world moved on to the next scandal. Titanium Solutions remained stable. In fact, we had our best quarter in 5 years. Turns out, standing up for your values is good for business. Who knew? I started dating again. Nothing serious, just dinner here and there with a woman I'd met at a charity function. She was a retired teacher, had never heard of Titanium Solutions, and didn't care that I was a CEO. She liked me for me. It was refreshing. But I still thought about that night at Chad's house. I still remembered the look on his face when he opened the door and called me a beggar. I still remembered the casual cruelty of his parents, and I still remembered Isabella's tears. Some wounds heal quickly, others leave scars. I was in my study one evening, reading through quarterly reports, when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Isabella was working a night shift. My girlfriend was at her book club. I almost didn't answer. But something made me get up and walk to the door. I looked through the peephole, and my heart stopped. Chad standing on my doorstep, alone, looking like hell. He'd lost weight. His clothes were rumpled. He had dark circles under his eyes. He looked like a man at the end of his rope. I debated not opening the door, calling security, pretending I wasn't home. But I opened it. "Mr. Cole," he said, his voice hoarse, I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I need to talk to you. It's late, Chad. I need 5 minutes, please. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let him in. I didn't invite him to sit. We stood in my foyer, the distance between us feeling like an ocean. I'm leaving tomorrow, he said, headed to Arizona with my parents, starting over, clean slate, all that. Good luck, I said, my voice flat. I'm not here for your blessing. I'm here to say, he paused, struggling with the words, I'm here to say you were right. I blinked. What? You were right about everything. I was using Isabella. I was using her to get to you, to your money, to fix my mess. I convinced myself I loved her, but I didn't. I don't even know what love looks like. My parents taught me that relationships are transactions, that people are assets. That's how they've lived their whole lives, and I repeated the pattern. I didn't know what to say. I just listened. When you fired us, I was so angry. I thought you were this tyrant who couldn't handle his ego being bruised. But then everything fell apart, and I had time to think. Really think. And I realized I'd become everything my parents taught me to be, and it made me miserable. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you deserve to know that you saved your daughter from me, from the person I was, maybe even from the person I still am, and because, he took a breath, because I'm sorry for how I treated you, for what I said, for the disrespect. You didn't deserve that. Nobody deserves that. No, I said quietly, nobody does. I know it doesn't change anything. I know it doesn't undo the damage, but I needed to say it before I left, before I started whatever comes next. We stood there in silence for a moment. I looked at this young man who'd caused so much pain, who'd nearly trapped my daughter in a lifetime of manipulation, and I tried to find anger, but all I felt was pity. Chad, I said finally, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope you break the patterns your parents set for you. I hope you learn to see people as people, not as assets. But that's not my job, that's your job, and it's going to be hard work, harder than anything you've done before. He nodded, I know. And Chad, if I ever hear that you've contacted my daughter again, for any reason, there won't be a second conversation. There won't be mercy. There will just be consequences. Do you understand? I understand. Then I think we're done here. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Isabella is lucky to have you. I hope she knows that. She does, I said, now. He left. I watched him walk down my driveway, get into a beat-up car that wasn't the luxury vehicle he used to drive, and disappear into the night. I closed the door and locked it. Then I went back to my study, poured myself a drink, and thought about closure, about whether that conversation gave me any, about whether apologies from toxic people even matter. I decided they don't. Not really, because the damage is already done. The lesson is already learned. The apology is more for the person giving it than the person receiving it. But maybe that's okay. Maybe Chad needed to apologize to start his own healing journey. And maybe I needed to hear it to close that chapter of my life completely. Either way, it was over. Finally, truly over. 6 months after the dinner that changed everything, Isabella and I were having brunch at our favorite spot. It was a Sunday morning, warm and sunny, the kind of day that makes you believe everything is going to be all right. I got asked out, she said casually, spearing a piece of waffle. I nearly choked on my coffee. What? There's this doctor at the hospital, pediatric oncology. He's asked me out 3 times over the past month. I finally said yes. And I tried to keep my voice neutral, tried not to sound like an overprotective father, failed miserably. She laughed, and we're having dinner next week. Don't worry, Dad, I did my research. He's a good guy, volunteers at free clinics, drives a 10-year-old Prius, lives in a modest apartment, no debt, no red flags. Sounds almost too good to be true. I thought so too, but I'm choosing to trust my instincts this time, my real instincts, not the ones clouded by charm and manipulation. I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. I'm proud of me too, and Dad, I'm proud of you for what you did. I know it cost you, I know it was hard, but you saved me, you really did. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but by then I might have been married with kids, trapped in a life I didn't want. You gave me a way out. You gave me the truth. That's the greatest gift a parent can give their child. We finished brunch and walked through the park near the restaurant. It reminded me of when she was little, when we'd come to this same park and she'd beg me to push her on the swings. Higher, Daddy, higher. Can I ask you something? She said as we walked. Always. Do you think Chad will actually change? Do you think he'll become a better person? I thought about his late-night visit, about the brokenness in his eyes, about whether people can really change their fundamental nature. I don't know, I said honestly. I hope so, for his sake. But change requires self-awareness, humility, and a lot of hard work. Most people aren't willing to do that work. They'd rather blame others for their problems than look in the mirror. That's what my therapist says too. Your therapist is smart. She also says I need to forgive you, fully forgive you, for the decision you made. Even though I understand it now, there's still a part of me that resents how it all went down. That hurt, but it was fair. I can accept that. But I'm working on it, because I know you did what you thought was right, and in the end, you were right. So I'm working on letting go of the resentment and just being grateful. Take your time, I said. There's no rush. Healing isn't linear. We walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then she said, I want you to meet him, the doctor. If things go well, before it gets serious, I want your opinion. Are you sure, after what happened last time? I'm sure, because last time I wasn't ready to hear the truth. This time, I am. If you get a bad feeling about him, I'll listen, I promise. Okay, I said, but can I make one request? What's that? Can we meet at a restaurant, somewhere public, somewhere with witnesses? She laughed, really laughed. Yeah, Dad, we can meet at a restaurant. A year after the dinner, I was invited to speak at a business conference. The topic was ethical leadership in modern business. I almost declined. I don't like public speaking. I don't like being in the spotlight. But my PR team convinced me it would be good for the company, good for my personal brand, good for showing that I'm not the tyrant some people still think I am. So I agreed. I stood on that stage in front of 500 business leaders and I told the story, not all of it, not the personal parts about Isabella, but I told them about being judged by my appearance, about being insulted in my own face, about the decision I had to make between letting it slide and standing up for my values. Character is not measured by clothes, I said, looking out at the sea of faces. It's not measured by the car you drive or the house you live in or the brand names you wear. Character is measured by how you treat people who can't give you anything, how you treat the waiter, the janitor, the person who shows up at your door in simple clothes and an old car, because those are the moments when your true self shows through, when there's no benefit to being kind, no reward for being respectful. Those are the moments that define who you really are. The audience was silent. I could see some of them nodding. Others looked uncomfortable. Good, they should be uncomfortable. I've been a CEO for 38 years, I continued. I've made thousands of decisions. Some of them were about money, some were about strategy, but the most important decisions I've ever made were about people, about who I allow in my circle, who I trust with my company, who I trust with my family. And sometimes those decisions are painful. Sometimes they cost you. But if you compromise on character, you've already lost everything that matters. After the speech, dozens of people came up to shake my hand, to thank me, to tell me their own stories of being judged or mistreated or underestimated. A young woman told me about being mocked at a job interview because she'd taken the bus instead of driving. A man told me about being passed over for promotion because his boss thought he didn't look the part. I listened to all of them, I heard their pain, and I realized that my story wasn't unique. It was universal. We all face judgment. We all encounter people who try to make us feel small. The only difference is what we do about it. That night, I called Isabella. How did the speech go? She asked. Better than expected. I think I might have actually helped some people. Of course you did. You're good at that, helping people, even when they don't know they need help. Speaking of which, how was your date with the doctor? Dad, that was 3 months ago. We're way past the first date stage now. Wait, what? Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to be sure before I introduced you. But I'm sure now. He's wonderful. He's kind and thoughtful, and he makes me laugh, and he's never once asked about your company or your money. I don't think he even cares. When can I meet him? Next Sunday, brunch, the usual place. I'll be there. And Dad, wear whatever you want. He won't judge you. How do you know? Because I told him the whole story, about Chad, about the dinner, about everything, and you know what he said. What? He said your father sounds like exactly the kind of man I'd want raising the woman I'm falling in love with. My throat got tight, my eyes got wet. He said that. He said that, so wear your comfortable clothes and drive your old car and be yourself, because that's who he wants to meet, the real you. The brunch was perfect. The doctor, his name was Adrian, was everything Isabella had promised. Kind, genuine, humble. He drove a Prius that had seen better days. He wore a simple shirt and jeans. He shook my hand firmly and looked me in the eye and called me sir without a trace of condescension. We talked for 2 hours, about medicine, about his childhood, about his work with underserved communities, about his parents who were immigrants and worked 3 jobs to put him through medical school, about his values, his dreams, his intentions with my daughter. And at no point did he ask about my company or my net worth or what I could do for him. After brunch, Isabella walked Adrian to his car. I watched them through the restaurant window, the way he looked at her, the way she smiled at him, the gentle kiss he gave her before getting in his ridiculous old Prius and driving away. When she came back to the table, I was smiling. So, she asked, what do you think? I think he's perfect for you. Really? Really, he's everything Chad pretended to be, and more importantly, he's everything Chad could never actually be. He's real. She sat down across from me, her eyes sparkling. I'm going to marry him, Dad. I know it's early. I know we've only been together a few months, but I'm going to marry him. I believe you. And when I do, I want you to walk me down the aisle in your comfortable clothes, and your old car can be parked right out front, and I don't care what anyone thinks, because you're my dad, and you're perfect just the way you are. I started crying, right there in the restaurant. A 67-year-old CEO crying into his coffee because his daughter finally understood what I'd been trying to teach her all along. That worth isn't measured in dollars or status symbols. That character matters more than appearance. That the best things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be earned through authenticity, kindness, and love. I'm proud of you, Bella, I said, wiping my eyes. Your mother would be so proud of you. I'm proud of us, she said, for getting through it, for surviving it, for coming out better on the other side. 2 years after the dinner that changed everything, I walked Isabella down the aisle. I wore a suit, a nice one but not flashy. She wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly. Adrian stood at the altar in a simple tux, crying happy tears, waiting for his bride. The ceremony was small, intimate, just family and close friends, people who mattered, people who loved us for who we were, not what we had. As I placed Isabella's hand in Adrian's, I whispered, "Take care of her." He whispered back, "With my life, sir." And I believed him. I sat in the front row and watched my daughter marry a good man, a real man, a man who would never call me a beggar or judge me by my clothes or use my daughter to solve his financial problems. During the reception, Isabella pulled me aside. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For saving me, for protecting me, for loving me enough to risk our relationship to do the right thing. I know it cost you, I know you suffered, but because of you, I found this. I found real love, and I would never have found it if you hadn't shown me what fake love looked like. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but I'm glad I didn't have to. I'm glad you were brave enough to be the bad guy for a while so I could find the good guy. We danced together, father and daughter, one last dance before she started her new life. The DJ played the song her mother and I had danced to at our wedding. Neither of us mentioned it. We didn't need to. We both felt her presence there, watching, smiling, proud. I love you, Dad, Isabella said as the song ended. I love you too, Bella, more than you'll ever know. 3 years after the dinner, I'm sitting in my study again. The same study where this whole story started, but everything is different now. Isabella and Adrian just had their first baby, a little girl. They named her after her grandmother, after my wife. I held that baby in my arms yesterday and I cried. Again, I seem to do that a lot these days. The company is thriving. We just broke ground on a new facility that will create 500 jobs. Good jobs, the kind with benefits and retirement plans and opportunities for advancement. The kind of jobs that change families' lives for generations. I still drive my old car. I still wear my comfortable clothes. I still don't care what people think of my appearance. Because I know who I am, I know what I've built, I know what matters. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Chad. I wonder if he ever changed. If he broke free from the patterns his parents set for him. If he found some measure of peace or redemption or self-awareness. I hope he did, not for my sake, but for his. Because holding on to bitterness and blame and resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It doesn't work. It just destroys you from the inside out. I learned something from that horrible dinner 3 years ago, something painful but necessary. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is the hardest thing. Sometimes protecting someone means hurting them first. Sometimes saving someone's future means blowing up their present. And I learned that character really is everything. That how you treat people when there's nothing to gain, that's who you really are. That's what defines you. That's what matters when everything else falls away. I fired Chad and his family not because they insulted me, though they did. Not because they wounded my pride, though they tried. I fired them because they revealed themselves to be fundamentally unkind people. People who judged others by superficial measures. People who saw relationships as transactions. People who would have poisoned my daughter's life with their values and their cruelty and their conditional love. And I'd do it again, without hesitation, without regret. Because at the end of the day, when all the noise fades away, and all the opinions don't matter, and all the criticism is forgotten, I can look at my daughter and my granddaughter and I can say, I protected you, I fought for you, I loved you enough to be hated for a while so you could be happy forever. That's what being a parent means, that's what being a leader means, that's what being a person of character means. You stand up, you do what's right, you accept the consequences, and you sleep soundly at night knowing that you chose love over likability, principles over popularity, and truth over temporary peace. I'm Raphael Cole. I'm 69 years old now. I'm a father, a grandfather, and a CEO. I've been called a beggar, a tyrant, and a hero. I've been praised and criticized in equal measure. But the only opinion that matters to me is the one I see reflected in my daughter's eyes when she looks at me. And in her eyes, I see love, respect, gratitude, understanding. That's worth more than any amount of money, worth more than any status or recognition or validation from strangers. That's everything. Character is not measured by clothes or cars or bank accounts. It's measured by how you treat people who can't give you anything, by the choices you make when no one is watching, by the stands you take when it costs you something. And on that measure, I sleep just fine. So if you're watching this and you've ever been judged by your appearance, underestimated because of how you dress, or dismissed because you don't fit someone's narrow definition of success, hear this: you are more than what they see. You are more than their limited perception. You are more than their judgment. And if you're watching this, and you're the person who judges others, who looks down on people, who treats service workers and strangers with disrespect because you think your status makes you superior, change. Please, for your own sake, change, because one day you'll judge the wrong person. You'll insult the wrong stranger. You'll reveal your character to someone who has the power to show you exactly what your character is worth. And when that day comes, you'll have no one to blame but yourself. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your own stories. Remember, kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can cost you everything.